Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Marion, it's lovely for you to join us tonight. I know it's an honor to have you here, and Mickey, it's an honor for Mickey to have you and host you, and she is so delighted that you were visiting with her. So welcome.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. So we have a topic tonight that goes against all that is happening in the world. So much difficulty happening in the world, and yet we are going to talk about Dogen Zenji's playfulness. And at the same time that all that difficulty is going on, perhaps playful, maybe it's the right thing to do, to think about something in the opposite direction of the darkness. But you know, it's when we think about playfulness, we think much more about Ryokan-san, and so Ryokan-san is this, you know, character of playfulness against Dogen Zenji's very serious nature. But we find, I think, examples of Dogen Zenji's form of playfulness in Shobogenzo. I think we can't appreciate the extent of the playful language that Dogen uses by right of his idiomatic phrases that go in all directions in Japanese, that are impossible to translate, and they just do not come across in the translations that we read. So it's difficult for us to find that linguistic, playful aspect of Dogen Zenji that is really apparent in Shobogenzo. But I think he also plays with us in other ways that we can appreciate in English. So Dogen Zenji will start going down a road and he'll say, so, you know, it's like this, and really, you know, you believe this and you go for this, and he'll do that for about 3 pages, leading you on, telling you that this is this particular way and this is this, and so forth and so on. And you find yourself agreeing with him, saying, yes, yes, yes. And then you turn the page, and in the next paragraph he says, if you've been thinking that, you are wrong. And you just are thrown completely to feel, oh my goodness, how could I have been so foolish as to gone along with that and not thought for myself. But, you know, he's talking about very complex and very deep issues. So he plays with us in that sense about leading us down a particular road, and like playing hide and go seek, the way Ryokan-san plays hide and go seek. So he hides out in leading you this way and then says, boo, sorry, you're off. But when we think about Dogen Zenji, we actually do not study Dogen Zenji, we do Dogen Zenji. We practice Dogen Zenji. So this is a very different way to be with Dogen Zenji. In how we do our practice is Dogen Zenji. And if you are practicing at a monastery for a long period of time, even a month or two, you begin to develop relationships with other monks, or lay people can do the same. If you are in long term, maybe this happens at a long sesshin. Many playful things happen in the spirit of practice. I mean, practice is to be enjoyed, and monks will entertain themselves by doing things to one another that create little funny problems for them. And so this is a sort of, I don't know whether Dogen Zenji invented that or not, or whether that happened in Dogen Zenji's temple. It's hard to imagine. But one of the first questions I asked Inoue Kondo Roshi when he was teaching Shobogenzo at Entsuji, I said, do you think Dogen Zenji ever laughed? And he said, of course he laughed. What do you mean? But of course he's reading Dogen Zenji in Japanese, and so he gets that sense of Dogen's lightheartedness on occasion, or perhaps his playfulness in language, which I have never particularly felt in Shobogenzo, except for what I spoke of earlier. But So as we do Dogen Zenji, we start to play, I think. Because, practice can get to be monotonous, and so monks will do things to one another. So we'll, for instance, in the chanting that we do, the kokyo is to carry the voice over from one to the other. So as we come through Hanya Shingyo, and then the bells would go, and you hold the voice until Myoho Rengekyo, or the next you chant in the next, and the voice is held through so that there's a continuity of voice. So usually, you would say, Hanya Shingyo Kanzeyon, something like that. And what the monks would do to one another in the place where I was practicing is that they would withhold this bell for a long time so that the monks would just be desperate for a breath to go from one to the other, and just very playfully just hold it and just look at the monk, as he's Anya Shingyo Myoho Rengekyo, and they have to go through a whole thing. And so that was one of the playful things that they would do to one another, just to test them out. What happened with you?
The first story that comes to mind is he was a professional composer and a jazz piano player. But he was also a little bit trained in drums. And there's all these drums, around. And they have like the big taiko drum by the Soto. And then we had what was called 6 o'clock noises. So at 6 o'clock you do like the full roll down, so people sort of know it's 6 o'clock, which is
in the
like
evening.
to orient you. Uh-huh. And he just got up and just did this like improvisational, like Jimi Hendrix style, like hitting like the edges and the sides and like doing the roll down, but then just like doing a little boop to like end it. And I just remember like we were just laughing so hard. And like all of a sudden you hear like the senior monk just yelling his name. Just like, and we just stopped. This blood curdling like, good! And like so the Shuso's then like running out like, no! Oh, it was so perfect. Oh, so perfect.
Oh. What about you, Allison? You were a long time at
Most of the time people were too serious. But there was one, we had a 10-day sesshin, and it was grueling.
Is this at Upaya?
No, this was at
Great Vow.
And, every morning one monk is assigned, or one layperson, either one is assigned to ring the wake-up bell. So they're running through all the halls doing the wake-up bell. And everybody's just, oh my God, I have to get up now, And so the last day, he sang some song as he was running. And everybody was like, this is the last day. So they're getting up. But anyway, and he almost got in trouble.
Yeah.
But Hogan was the Roshi. He says, well, sometimes it's the right time to do the wrong thing.
Yeah, so, that's good. That's good.
So anyway, so that was fun.
I had to do the wake-up bell one time when we had, the whole place was packed with visitors because we were having a big seminar about equality. And so teachers came from all over, and it was just this huge gathering of monks and teachers. So I had to do the wake-up bell. Now, usually, if the young guys are doing the wake-up bell, it's and as fast as you can ring that bell. Well, I was a little bit older, and I couldn't run as fast as the guys, so I was ringing the bell. Gajang, 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 gajang. So after breakfast, all of the Roshis just started laughing, and they said, oh, let's all go back to sleep now. Ka-chang, ka-chang, ka-chang. That was pretty funny. Yeah. I had another thing going with, there was a monk who came after me, and you're senior to whoever comes after you. And that's how you were ranked according to when you arrived at the temple. That was your seniority. So when they knew you were coming, your day was assigned to you so that they had various monks who they wanted to be more senior to those who were coming. But this guy came after. He actually had been kicked out of 2 other temples. So he came to our temple to practice. Very difficult guy. He practiced karate, and he had just a very hot temper, and he was very difficult to practice with. But in any event, we were out in afternoon practice in the garden, doing gardening. And our job, he and I, we were opposite one another, and we were right at the edge of the pond, and we were supposed to pick out weeds from around the edge of the pond. So he was quite a ways from me, maybe further than where Marion is, maybe 2 cushions over. And so we're both facing the pond, and I picked up a couple of stones, and I threw them over, and they plopped right in front of him. Well, he looked up and he turned around to look behind him, because all the monks were behind us in the road behind us. And he looks to see who's doing that. Well, he didn't see anybody, so he goes back to it. And after a few minutes, I threw another few over and plonk. And he's the same thing. He's looking around. Where is that? Who is doing that? He never suspected me at all. You know? This happened at least 4 or 5 times, and he was furious. Who is doing this to me? Where is that coming from? And I started laughing at that point. And he looked, and he started laughing too. It was pretty funny. I threw one over so he could see me doing it. So that was kind of fun. That was the kinds of playful things that you do with one another in practice that are unexpected, and you just sort of, what else are you going to do? You're going to play a bit. And so, anyway, that changed my relationship with that guy. It brought us together a little bit, even though we had some other really very difficult exchanges. But nevertheless, when I was leaving, I was doshi the day that I was my last day there, and he had to carry the incense box around to the other altars. And so I had a chance when we were at the other altars to thank him for his practice together. And so we just had an opportunity, to repair the difficulties that had happened, so, which I won't go into, because we're talking about playfulness at the moment. But anyway, so I hope he's doing well. I hope he's okay in his life. So, what else happened to you? What else did you do in playfulness in the kitchen? There must be stuff that goes on.
I'm thinking, of all the different kinds of funny things that happen. Like, some things are funny just because they're, unexpected.
Yes.
Or, because, something happens during a ceremony that's just so, unforeseen and predictable that, it's like you don't really know what to do exactly.
Yes.
Okay, so this is one that I did unintentionally. But when I was doing a roll down for a ceremony, the Roshi told me to play like thunder. And this was for the Shuso ceremony, so there's all these people that came. And so the procession's coming in, and I realized I hadn't realized that I'd never practiced with wearing koromo. And so I didn't know what the sleeves would do.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing the roll down, and my sleeves are just getting wrapped up in the sticks. And it's I was told to play like thunder, so it's just I just kept going. And it was just so absurd to see someone trying so hard to do something that's not working, but not for a lack of effort.
Nobody told you to tie your sleeves back for that. Yeah, right. Oh, they probably didn't do that on purpose to tell you to tie your sleeves back to play that
I would
drum.
think not.
Well, they just wanted to make trouble for you. I
Maybe.
mean, that's another playful thing that
Maybe.
it might have been those guys doing that, you know.
Well, I remember Hoyt Saroshi was there, and he said sleeves. At the end, I think I just said like next time.
Right.
Oh, Hoyt Saroshi. See, I feel like I have to like talk.
Hoitsu Roshi is Suzuki Roshi's son.
Oh.
I feel like once you start like saying it, like the stories come. But he was, Shinru Suzuki's son, and he was like,
But he's about 80 years. He's 90,
Yeah.
85 or something.
he's
like
an
that.
old man at this point.
Yeah.
And a good friend of like the main teacher at where I was. But he had this like uncanny ability to just like communicate without words, and I think that was one of his things because there were so many foreigners and he didn't speak much English or like any other language, but he wanted I think to be like inclusive, and so he would like always just play games. Like he would just walk in, and you know, like the stern teacher, you know, we're all just like novice, but he would walk in, and I remember one evening like we had strung like the fly catchers like in the eating hall, and he walked in and he saw it, and he just like pretended to jump up like a fly. But like those, like to me that was the funniest thing that happened. It's like whenever, it's like at the end of the day, at the end of the evening, like if you were like one of the fortunate few to be like an attendant for like a visiting teacher, you sort of leave with the teachers who then go to their residence, whereas the other monks just sort of wait and then do clean up afterwards. But it's like this whole rigid day, and now it's over. And like every day is kind of a long day. But then you walk out into the courtyard, which is just beautiful, and these Roshis, I swear, they would just like meander like cats. It's like they weren't on like, what would you call that? A vector. You know what I mean?
Okay.
They weren't like, I'm going there. It was just like the opposite of all we had done that day. And it was just this
Meandering.
meandering's really, it's like just not really going anywhere
Yeah.
at that point anymore.
So hanging around, smoking.
Well, so I feel like there's that like tension and then just
Yeah.
the
Right.
abandonment of it.
Right. Right. Well, I think I think that practice brings that out. That there is so much tension in practice itself, in holding the forms, and in the ceremony, and in zazen, and then it has to be broken somehow. It has to be balanced with humor, with something lighthearted that allows that, which is why we see Dogen Zenji and Ryokan-san as, you know, two of the great teachers, considered to be the two great teachers, because they are in juxtaposition to that very thing that you say, that deep tension, and then the playfulness that has to break it, otherwise you become brittle.
I was always sitting, like, a couple, like, Dogen Zenji quotes came, and, it's like, I think it's, like, my favorite line of his. It's that a Zen master's life is one constant mistake. It's like, he's doing all of this, but at the same time...
Every day a mistake.
Oh, and I think, like, and I think it's just one of the most poetic images, just in writing, but, you know, he was saying, like, you know, a monk is like the light of a candle, like, coming out into the world, but as it were, left outside on a sunny day. It's like we're cultivating this light that's just sort of like, you know, I mean, like...
It's already there.
So you, like, feel good about this thing that you're doing, but it's like... It's like you're just doing one big mistake.
As Suzuki Roshi said, don't take it too seriously. You shouldn't take it so seriously.
Oh, that reminds me of a Hoitsa Roshi quote. But he was just saying, he sat down to like give his talk, you know. I mean, and you put like, I mean, it's just growing up with these like images in our media, but then you see this like 80-year-old Japanese man sitting there with like these elegant robes, you know, with like the attendant bringing him water, and he's just like, Zen is very funny. It is. It really is. It takes a while to like get the joke, I think. You gotta really practice at it. But it's worth it. It's a good one. It's a real good one. Worth the time investment for sure.
Yeah. What happens in the kitchen, Bob?
Oh my gosh.
Bob was our Tenzo for many years. I mean, it's got to be funny things that happen, you know.
Just the unpredictability
Yeah.
of things, of something not getting done on time, or forgetting to put an ingredient in something, and it's like, oh shit.
Right.
Trying to, damage control, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or getting here and finding that you left out your ingredients at home.
Yeah, or always forgetting something. I have to always forget something, and then, Mickey bails me out, goes to the store. And so, a lot of things like that.
Yeah.
Oh. But it all works out. One way or the other.
Yeah. But truly, as we do this very serious nature of Dogen Zenji, we should remember, Zen is funny.
Do you know what, like, I wonder? Because it's like, people write up commentaries on, like, these books, that like, these great master works. But I think, like, truly, like how many people have just, like, I'm going to write what I think time is.
Mm-hmm.
And just, like, how, like, just the audacity of that, in a sense. I feel like I take that for granted. But just to imagine, like, coming to a point in your life where it's like, I'm going to write about what time is. I like to think it had an impression in his time, you know? It's like, that's a pretty outlandish thing to do.
Yeah. Or space.
Or space.
That's my favorite fascicle. And I'm going to tell you what space is. I'm going to teach space.
I think, like, this is like the range of Zen humor. It's like extends to all domains. Like, we can joke about time now as such.
Right.
Like, that's, I think, a truly beautiful game.
Yeah.
To just, like, to try to, like, to deal in these, like, huge abstractions.
Yeah.
That are virtually impossible to even, like...
Who can say? Who can say them? Yeah, you can't.
To even say it, but then to, like, expound on it.
Yes.
Is, I mean, that's an undertaking.
Yes. Imagine how deep Dogen Zenji went to get to that. Imagine the tension in that temple to get there.
And just what it must have felt like to have been done with it, too.
Yeah, right.
To actually, like, put into some expression what you think that is.
Yeah.
And how,
Yeah,
what a gift that is to yourself, even.
yes, yeah. And it seems as though, standing in this century, Dogen Zenji is incredibly modern, yet he's writing in 1200. And, I feel as though so much of the richness of his insight has kind of watered away over the centuries. It's my feeling as though we don't have quite the ability to get him.
I think there's that hesitation of attributing, like, modern ideas to him. Because it almost seems reductivist in a way. but I think he was one of those like kind of independent creators of phenomenology. Just this like whole different way of like constructing meaning from experience.
Yeah. Oh, he's brilliant, brilliant teacher, no doubt. Yeah.
But to say he was a phenomenologist, like, to me, does not diminish from his impact. But I
Mhm.
think it does contextualize him in, like, the pantheon of other thinkers. Which my feeling is, like, I think some Zen practitioners are hesitant to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because they want, there's that feeling of him being unique at the same time, which
Interesting.
I
Yeah.
think is, like, reverent in a way.
Yes. Yeah.
But I think maybe partly detrimental to our understanding him.
Could be. Could be. And of course, we have him in translation, so it's distant. And he wrote in medieval Japanese, which is then translated into modern Japanese, which is then translated into English. And now we've got about 5 translations of Shobogenzo, and so it's. We do our best. We do our best.
But don't you think, Will, that over the centuries he's come to be imbued with holiness so that there's this expectation that you can't be very playful in relationship to Dogen?
Maybe that's like the greatest playfulness of all in Zen. It's because you start out knowing that it's just like everydayness, and I think people know that, and that's what attracts them to it. But as you practice, you find yourself in it.
Yeah.
And then it becomes more substantial seeming. I think that's just part of the natural progress. It's like then you make something of it to then sort of realize the joke. So I think we do that as individuals. We probably also do that as collectives to some degree. But I think in the truest sense, why does this matter, for our practice? What others think of him or not, I think is...
But I think your point is, he's certainly being more and more lionized as we go forward.
Well, I'm just remembering when we were at AHG, and the young man who was our host and showing us around, I remember him saying, I can't believe that for so many years we put Shobogenzo up on the altar and bowed down to it, but we never ever read it.
Yeah.
And that's come about since Westerners have become interested in reading it.
Yeah. Well, there were very few copies of it. And so it got stuck up on dark shelves. Even the temple where I trained at, it was discovered on a 5-level shelf, which I passed by all the time on my route to get from my room to the restroom, along on the dark side of the temple, behind all of the doors. There are passages in the temples that are secret. And it was in the darkness, and they discovered in I think the 1950 or something.
Really?
And so it just lay hidden for a long, long time. And so I don't know whether people thought that they couldn't read it, or they didn't, maybe they were afraid of what was in it. I have no idea. But to some degree, yes, it's because it is now translated into so many different languages that it becomes, it's a Bible. That, and I don't know if Dogen meant that at all. I don't think so. So...
I think humor does evolve, and I think Americans are sort of, I think at some point central to this notion of irony, or at least it's partially attributable to us, not that we have exclusive hold on it. But to me, like, that's just so ironic. It's like these people who are living in this monastery, engaging the actual practice. And just for me to, like, put myself there and to think, like, oh, but we actually have to be, like, studying in the scholastic way, this thing that we're actually already doing, which is the whole point of it anyway. And then that we would sort of impose upon them is, I think, on some level ironic.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yeah, it is. I mean, when I say we do Dogen, we do we practice. That's what it is. So, I mean, is it necessary then to read Shobogenzo?
Or are we just creating another version of the Bible?
Maybe, yeah. But I mean, perhaps. I don't know. I deeply value Dogen Zenji's teachings, but I don't know that. I don't know that I get more out of reading Dogen than I do out of bowing. I think bowing is a more essential thing for realization than to sit and read a fascicle, although I'm very fascinated by some of the fascicles.
But as I think about this, like, there's no real, like, Bibles in the Orient. Not like we have. There's not gospel.
No.
So I think, like, we come to this conversation, like, from a completely different perspective than I think Japanese do. It's like, I think the Shobogenzo, if you just grew up in a culture that was absent gospel, like, why would you even assume that that's what it would be, or that that's what he was doing?
Sure, yeah.
Or I think you're...
Maybe.
It's just very different.
Yeah. Well, I recall when we were discussing being time, and your question about the writer was that the writing was coming from the relative looking into the absolute, whereas Dogen Zenji stands in the absolute, and he asks us to stand in the absolute with him, right? So, to some degree, do we mistake Dogen Zenji? We're standing in the relative. Maybe we haven't quite gotten to the absolute. Do we mistake him by living in the relative and seeing him in the relative world rather than in the absolute? I don't know exactly what I'm asking, but I think that there's some interplay of the relative and the absolute in connection with how we hold Dogen Zenji. Certainly, in practice, we are doing the absolute. Dogen is clear that this is awakening itself. So then, when we read him, where do we stand when we read him?
I sort of think, like, I think we play as adults, but I think if we're lucky, we play it in, like, a more complex and intricate way than we even knew how to as children. I think we call that art. But not art is at that, like, play level. Because I think a lot of art is, like, descriptive. It's like there's something that someone's trying to convey, and they convey it to the best of their ability. But I think, like, our most celebrated works of art are, like, go beyond sort of descriptive, and they're experiential. So it's not like telling you the thing, it's showing you. And it's sort of like pulling you into it in a way that, like, you just get funneled into it, and you go with the artist in a shared experience. And I think that's, like, Dogen Zenji's genius. It's like he's never really describing the thing so much as he's
kind of being.
He's just being it. And
and saying, getting words to it.
It's like he's writing from it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I think it's like in contemplating, I don't know, I just think that for me is somewhere along that divide of the absolute and the relative. Maybe it's one aspect of it.
Yeah. Anyway, there we are. Anybody else? Anything else? Yeah, Bob.
It occurred to me that, people come to Zazen and come to practice for all sorts of reasons. And it occurred to me that Zazen itself, over time, becomes playful to the extent that we don't take so seriously the stream, the flow of thoughts and emotion, and in that letting go, there is playfulness. Zazen becomes play. It's it's
Yes,
different.
it's like going on a vacation from the turmoil.
Yeah, I don't know. And you mentioned joke. I feel like the joke's on me. Really, after sitting for some years, it's like the joke's on me. I came to practice, I want to figure something out. I want to attain this or that or the other thing. And it's like one day I realized, this is like Dorothy and Oz, just click your heels 3 times. You were always there. You could always go home. But no, I have to go on these adventures and do all this. Like, no, joke's on Bob.
I really,
Yes.
you've been talking about mistakes. I really appreciated what my teacher Eido Roshi would always say, that mistakes are part of the ceremony.
Yes.
And also that if you make a mistake, make it loud.
Yeah.
And just thinking of something humorous, when there was a journalist, I think, who was investigating various things and came to see him and said that he had been to a place where there were transcendental meditators going on, and he said they can levitate. What do you do? And Eido Roshi said, well, we just sit around. And the fellow said, a few minutes later, oh, is that the time? Oh, I'm so sorry, I've got to go. So, we enjoyed the story.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That reminds me of a story you told when you were studying with Kobenchino Roshi, and there was some big question that he answered, and then he went away and a visiting teacher came and someone asked the same question, and it was the exact opposite answer.
That was Katagiri Roshi, yeah. Yeah, Koben's teaching was, if there's anybody who irritates you, you should stick with that person, because that's where your practice is. And don't try to get away from them, so forth and so on. So he went away, and Katagiri Roshi came to be with us, and one of the students on a Thursday morning after practice when we were sitting around said to Katagiri Roshi, so Roshi, there's this person at work that irritates me so much. Every time I go near him, I get so irritated. What should I do? Katagiri Roshi just looked nonplussed. He said, stay away from him. Don't go near him. So we burst out laughing, and poor Katagiri had no idea what we were laughing at. But that's it, but you do have that choice. You always have that choice. If you can't stand, if your practice is so muddled and it's irritating so much, you can always go over there if you're not able to hold your practice with something that is problematic. You have that choice always.
But I think there's
Both are
like
good.
there's like a choice underneath the choice. Because it's sort of like, I think it's kind of like Bob's point, or how I understand Bob's point. It's like you think you need to do it. And like maybe you do that thing that you thought that you needed to do, or you realize like it was like a foolish thing to think that you needed to do, or that it's like impossible or whatever, and you come to this point where I think you can then choose to practice in because you want to. Because you enjoy it.
Also a choice. Lots of choices. Yeah, lots of choices. So. All right, everybody, thank you. Beings are numberless, I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassed, I vow to become it. And notice, Marion, that we took Aitken Roshi's teaching on unsurpassed. He, Buddha's way is unsurpassable, or it's Buddha's way is unsurpassed. And Aitken Roshi felt that if we say it's unsurpassable, it means that we can never become Buddha. So, and even though it is a great unsurpassable practice, but he still took it as the meaning that unsurpassable for us to never become it. So he said it's unsurpassed, and I vow to become it, meaning we can each become Buddha.
I'm so grateful to translators because I don't read Japanese or Chinese, and I'm just so grateful to the people who make that effort to really get to the point as best they can.
Yeah, me too. Very valuable to us, the translators. So, okay, my friends, thank you.